117 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So today we thought we would talk about the sort of the new adult aspect of this book and like the sex scenes that are in it and like sort of the jarring nature that people sort of found themselves in when reading this book and expecting one thing and sort of getting another. So both of us, this was sort of our first foray, and it sort of was one of the first books I feel like that categorized itself as like a new adult genre, which I feel like is still a very new genre.
Yeah.
Like there's not even a category for it at the bookstore. It's still like young adult teen fiction and just adult like fiction and fantasy.
Yeah.
So like, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, like I feel like I can't remember if this book, I think it came out after Crescent City. Did it? They were around the same time. Yeah. So I guess Crescent City was like the first one from Sarah J. Maas, but then this one was also super jarring from Crescent City in the sex. Like Crescent City was jarring in its own ways, like drug use and swearing. But yeah, I think those two books were kind of the first ones that were marketed as new adults. Because, like, I guess if you think of other books we've read, like, Discovery of Witches could maybe be categorized as new adult now, like, retroactively. It's kind of romance. There is fantasy.
Yeah, but I find that it is still, like, very complex. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the whole point of a new adult genre is to sort of have the simplicity of plot that young adult stuff has, but with the more mature, like, scenes of that adults can read and, like, more explicit and, like, swearing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would put Discovery of Witches in that category just because it is so complex and, like, there's such a big historical aspect that I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of Outlander, but with magic. And I wouldn't put Outlander as a new adult book.
Yeah. I guess it is a bit weird, because, like, if you think of, like, Crescent City, and not to get too spoilery, but, like, the whole world that they're creating and that, and the, like, links and all this, it's like, this is all really complex, too. Why wouldn't this just go into the adult fantasy genre?
But
Or do you mean, like, the themes of the book are more YA? Like, I'm just kind of...
Yeah, like, it feels like, and we have read a ton of romantasy, fantasy, young adult stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sort of, it feels like there's a very predictable sort of formula for like young adult and new adult. Like you have your struggling main character, they meet someone, they maybe sometimes fall in love, and then there's a whole like you have to overthrow like a government or some sort of like bad guy.
Yeah.
And then at the end, like they realize they were made for each other and they decide to choose each other and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes they live happily ever after, sometimes they don't. But like it just seems very like this is the formula for a young adult book. And while I think that it is well written, I think that they write it sort of, it's very simply written.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a very clear difference between this sort of a book and, for example, like, Game of Thrones, right? If you were to read Game of Thrones, there's, like, a million different characters. It is all written, you know, in a very different style.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like there's a different formula. Same with like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is a fantasy book, but you would never compare it to new adult, young adult. You know what I mean? Like you can see a clear divide. Same thing with the Wheel of Time, right? Like it's written in such a different way. It's almost like less narrative. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I find when we read our young adult, new adult books, it's very it's written in character driven, a very narrative style. Yeah. Whereas I find typical fantasy books or like sci-fi books are sort of written in a more, like a little bit more clinically, if that makes sense. Not that it's bad, it's not, it's just different.
Yeah.
And I find that it would be easier for a teenager who maybe to jump into a new adult book than it would be for them to jump to a fantasy, like in the fiction section.
Yeah, and I do find that, like, there's such a broad spectrum of fantasy. Like, I loved Lord of the Rings, and I tried to read Game of Thrones and wanted to yeet myself off a cliff. So, there's, like, it's just so... I found it kind of overwhelming, like, when I was looking for books after the YA genre, which is kind of why I think I kind of stuck in the YA genre so long after... into adulthood, basically, because I was like, I don't know where to jump in, and like fantasy is very male writer heavy as well. And not that I don't read books written by men, but it's rare now. Like I've found my groove, I guess, of like the NA gives me a good idea like of books that I will like, but are an older protagonist now, which I love. You're not getting the teenagers, which I don't really want to be reading about anymore. You're getting your like 18 to 30 odd, not that they're that old usually, but 18 to maybe 20 something characters. So yeah, I like that. In like generally if it's marketed as NA, I'm like, oh, I'll probably like that book.
Yes.
So I do think that it's helpful as a genre for me.
Yeah, I wish that more like bookstores and stuff caught on. Mm-hmm. Because as of right now, it is like you go into the bookstore, it is not advertised.
No, but it is funny because we went to the bookstore the other day and all of Sarah J. Maas's books, I think even Throne of Glass was over in fantasy, and I was like, oh, they're not even marketing Throne of Glass as YA anymore.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because like I still think Throne of Glass is YA.
I agree, but I think the issue is that most authors tend to stick to a genre, right? So I feel like you can't put Crescent City and especially Court of Silver Flames in the young adult section. And you can't really split up the author's works. You can't say, well, we're going to put Throne of Glass in the young adult section and we're going to put the rest over in the fantasy section. So I feel like it was a deliberate choice to be like, if you can't put some of her stuff in the young adult stuff, so we'll just put it all in the fantasy stuff.
Yeah, I do kind of feel bad for like anybody who went into ACOSF as a YA book. Like my niece has read them, the main three, and I'm like, you're not allowed to read Silver Flames yet. Like that is too far. That one is too much. So I do kind of feel bad for like, or if you were looking for that YA and then you got to this book and you were like, holy shit, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah.
Like I can understand that.
Yeah, and some people don't like spice.
Yeah.
And like find it awkward. I don't find it awkward to read about it. I find it awkward to talk about it afterwards.
Yeah. Which is what we do.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, I find it awkward to describe it on the podcast. Yeah. But, like, I don't find it awkward to read it in the moment.
No. I find it weird, too, because, like, the book we did last month, Wicked. Kingdom of the Wicked. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That first book was kind of marketed as YA. And then the rest of the series, I haven't read it, but is more NA. And, like, I think you can get it in the YA section, or at least you could get the first book in the YA section before. So it just seems like we don't know what to do with NA yet. So I'm hoping that bookstores, like you said, kind of develop a section for it and figure it out, because, like, I feel like a young adult can easily get into Kingdom of the Wicked, and then you're like, oh, you can't read the next book until you're older. Like, it just seems we haven't figured it out yet as a society, this whole NA business.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so I guess we're going to get into it. So just a heads up, this is not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy, because it's an NA book.
So I guess last week's episode, too much happened, and I sort of don't even remember, what happened. But, like, Nesta keeps training, and, her and Cassian end up having, well, I guess first she finds the first of the dread trove, the mask. She puts it on to save herself. And they realize that because she is made, she can use the objects. It took a lot to get it. She almost died. Cassian and Azriel could have died, but they get it. And they have sex. Cassian and Nesta do.
The three of them. We wish.
Yeah. And afterwards, they just keep training. Feyre still doesn't know that her baby is going to kill her.
It's not funny.
It's not funny. Hellion doesn't know about Lucian being his son. Nesta doesn't know that apparently she made a new trove with her magic after going to a blacksmith. Nobody knows anything.
No.
So I guess Nesta and Cassian sort of, they renew their sexual relationship. Like, they have sex at one time, but then they keep at it. Mm-hmm. And I guess the week ended last week with Nesta sort of realizing that she's shocked that Feyre loved Tamlin and that he never deserved her, sort of making parallels to Cassian loving her and her not deserving it. So, this week, we are on week 4. We're reading chapters 44 to 58. So, we skip so it's Nesta, Emery, and Gwyn are training, and Nesta's remembering the night before, sort of giving us a flashback. Apparently Cassian took her back to her room last night, and they had a good old 69. But he also noticed, I guess before all this happened, not during, because that would be awkward. He noticed that she was reading a book on Valkyries, and he's teasing them at training about how they're complaining and they're not being a very effective Valkyrie unit. And they're all like, I guess Emery and Gwyn are like, you told him? And she's like, I did not. And he's like, dude, I'm not an idiot. So, like, he put it together from her book, and then he also noticed that she was doing the mind-stilling technique, like the meditation stuff. Mm-hmm. And the girls are, like, shocked that he even knows what mind-stilling is. But he's like, I fought beside the Valkyries in the war. Sort of just telling us how, like, old he actually is, and he's going after a 20-year-old woman. So, she's 22 or 23 at this point, I'd say, but still.
Yeah, it's...
nothing like dating down.
Yeah. Robbing the cradle, literally.
Yeah.
Ugh. I don't know. I don't know how to get into this, because it's every book. Male is 5,000 years old, and the woman is a teenager, and you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, find someone your own age.
Yeah.
500.
Yeah, not 5,000, but...
well, no, find someone your own age, 500 years old.
Oh, okay. Thought you were like, they're 500, not 5,000. It's like, I was exaggerating, but...
no, I get it. I get it.
Love
that
it.
was Dracula.
Yeah.
He was 5,000 years old.
Every book ever.
Yeah. Anyway, so he reveals, like, what happened with the Valkyries, that they actually sacrificed themselves to save something called the Menhir Pass, which was, like, a suicide mission to begin with. And, like, he really admired them because they chose to fight even when the bravest Illyrians would not. And he mentioned the words, like, friends, like, some of my quote-unquote friends were Valkyries. And Nesta's like, friends like friends, or like friends like sexual partners?
Yeah.
And she's like a little bit jealous, but like they're dead, so
yeah.
So Cassian actually fought his superiors during that war because he wanted them to go help the Valkyries, knowing it was a suicide mission, but they beat him and chained him to a wagon. And when he gained consciousness, all the Valkyries are dead. So, like, I just don't understand. Like, I understand why we keep the Illyrians around, because they're obviously good in a fight. But, like, they are so horrible and backwards. Like, should they just all die?
Well, the thing is, they're raised that way. Like, how are you supposed to... You're like, they're not changing. But you're still raising them to fight each other and to, like... listen to the most powerful person. Even Cassian is only in charge because he's got his bajillion siphons. Like, they're raised in this way. If you change the way that you're raising them, if you don't do this blood rite where they kill everybody, like, maybe they won't turn out the way they're turning out. But they're not changing it from the root. They're not teaching children better, so they're never going to grow into adults that they're, like, are better.
Yeah, that's true. So... Cass is like, let's head back to training. Like, let's start up again. And Nesta suggests that if they're going to be Valkyries reborn, they should combine Illyrian and Valkyrie techniques. Which, like, her suggestion and sort of her idea really, like, leaves Cass and Azriel both, like, really amazed. Like, and I don't know if it's at the idea itself of combining the Illyrian and Valkyrie techniques, or if it's at the idea of her and her friends wanting to train to be Valkyries.
Yeah.
So, Cassian doesn't really know many of the Valkyrie techniques, so he asks Gwyn to bring him any info on them that she has for him to study. And he's like, he's really happy about it. He's happy that they're doing this. Later, he actually tells Feyre about it at dinner at the River House. And he sort of thought back to her vote. So, again, before, in last week's episode, when they found out that Nesta made these new weapons, so Rhys found out first, told Cass, Az, and Amren, and they voted on whether they should even tell Nesta that she did that or not. Cass and Az voted that she should know. Rhys and Amren voted that she should not know. So Feyre was going to be the deciding vote. So Feyre thinks absolutely she should know.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually offered to be the one to tell her. But Cassian said that he would do it when the time is right. And I'm like, when the time is right, because that's not going to backfire.
Also, yeah, I hate it. It's
right?
So
like, tell her immediately.
Yeah.
And, yeah, just tell her immediately. Like, don't wait. Because that just
home.
shows you are hiding it from her.
Yeah, go home and be like, hey, so, I was just here and this.
Yes. Yeah. Amren sort of chimed in, like, during the Valkyrie conversation that she always liked the Valkyries, except for their king, who is as much at fault for their deaths as the Illyrians who wouldn't fight. So I don't even understand why they had a king instead of a queen. Like, if they're this awesome female fighting unit, why would they have a male telling them where to go and what to do? That seems stupid.
Also, I didn't realize that they would have a king, because they're supposedly just, like, they're not a race. Like, Illyrians are a race.
That's true.
Valkyries were just, like, anybody who had talent and wanted to go train. So it just surprises me that they have a king. That just seems weird.
Yeah. So I guess I feel like maybe a king was more of like their like all commander, maybe. You know what I mean?
Maybe, but yeah, then it's even weirder that this whole legion of feminist females that are supposed to be like what we aspire as women reading this book to. Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, so like Cassian was obviously really traumatized about that battle.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually, like, I don't remember if he thought this or said it. I think he thinks it, that he has never gone back to those mountains where they all died. I think it's called the Golian Pass.
Mm-hmm.
And his first lover outside of the Night Court had been a Valkyrie named Tanwyn, which is fun.
Yeah.
And he actually said that he says to the table he thinks Nesta would have fit in well with them because they were all beautiful but fierce. And then they discuss Nesta a bit. I really hate how they talk about her all the time, like, without her being there.
Yeah, me too. And so does she, so.
Yeah. And they describe her as, like, a caged wolf who never even learned how to be a wolf. So she has all of these predatory instincts that she never really learned how to use. But she never learned because of, like, human propriety, like the roles of females and that sort of thing. And that's why she's as prickly as she is, because she's got all of these, like, killer instincts and these, like, instincts to fight. But she was sort of told that your role as a woman is not to do those things.
Yeah.
Elaine then tells them that no, she didn't really learn how to fight and, like, be aggressive like that, but she's, like, learned to turn that into a skill on the dance floor, and she apparently, like, loves to dance.
Mm-hmm.
And that she is a true artist, with music. Like, when there's music, that's when she's, like, an artist, sort of like Feyre. And again, I just wrote in my notes, like, is this conversation appropriate when she isn't present?
No. And I'm also, I'm kind of annoyed that, like, Elaine is there. Like, I could maybe understand if they're like, hey, as a court, we'll have a conversation about if it's still wrong, but if she's progressing, blah, 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 blah. But, like, and I get Elaine's her sister. But you're not including Elaine in so many important discussions, but you're going to gossip about Nesta with Elaine there. I think it's wrong.
Elaine tells them all of a time when Nesta got revenge on, like, a socialite at the age of 14. Apparently this socialite was mean to Elaine because she was so beautiful.
Of course.
So one night, Nesta, like, dolled herself up in all of her jewels and, like, her snazziest dress, and essentially, like, caught the eye of a duke that had come across the sea, that the socialite was like, oh, he's mine. Mm-hmm. Sort of like a Bridgerton sort of scenario when, you know, in the first one with the prince.
Yes. I
remember?
Don't remember a whole lot. I watched it when it first came out. I don't think I've watched it again. But yeah, I do remember the prince being there, and he was like, oh, you're the diamond of the season, or whatever they call it.
Well, so, like, the whole thing was like, Daphne had no interest in the prince, but then, like, one of the other girls did. But then when the guy she really wanted, like, was like, no, get away from me, she was like, all right. So then she was like, then I'll go for the prince. Yeah. So then she, like, turned on all of her charm, and the prince, like, his eye went right to her. So sort of like a similar thing. Mm-hmm. And Elaine said, like, all it took was one night of dancing, and he asked their father for Nesta's hand the next day. Even though Nesta didn't really have any... She didn't want the Duke. She just wanted to take him away from this girl. Anyway, But, like, so, Nessa's dad was like, she's too young to get married yet. Like, go away. And sort of even, like, Elaine then went further back and said that, like, their mother honed the artistry of dance into, like, a weapon in Nesta so that she might one day marry a prince. Like, that was sort of their goal.
Yeah.
For Nesta.
I don't know if it was last week or the week before, we got from Nesta's point of view, too, that, like, her mother's mother, yeah, would, like, hit her for doing steps wrong in the dance and stuff. So, like, it's clearly been, like, drilled into her. Like, she learned it, I guess. And she was older, too, when they lost everything. I don't remember how old she would have been, but, yeah.
Yeah. So, Elaine was just glad that Nesta seems to have found, like, something, like, training as a Valkyrie to funnel the rage into, but, like, Cassian was thinking to himself that, like, there has to be more for her to heal. Like, it can't all be about the training. There has to be joy and music.
Why didn't Elaine say, hey, Nesta used to love dancing. Maybe we should sign her up for a dance class instead of forcing her to train with Illyrian soul, like, warriors near her, which was their original idea. You're like, why didn't Elaine say, hey, she used to love dance. Maybe get her a private dance teacher. Maybe put her in a dance class somewhere. No.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I know. No one, you know. Elaine knows her the best, but
doesn't actually care about her well-being.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. Cass, they time jump then. Like, there's a little jump. We don't know how many days pass. But the girls are doing Valkyrie exercises, and they're brutal. Mm-hmm. And Cass asks Nesta what she would name a sword if she had the chance. And the other two girls come up with, like, silly ones. Like, Gwen's like, ooh, Silver Majesty. And Emery's like, Foe Slayer. And they're, like, all bad.
Yeah.
And Nesta just says, Killer. Because that's all swords do is kill.
Yeah.
And so after training, she's like, hey, why? Why did you do that? Like, why were you so insistent on me answering?
Yeah.
Because he kept saying, like, come on, tell me.
He's so subtle.
And he tells her then, like, the right moment, apparently it's now, he tells her that she created a new trove. And he then says, we don't know what they do yet. So he let that we slip out, which she catches. And she's like, what do you mean we? So then he tells her that, you know, they all know about it. And he can tell she's getting angry, but then he's like, but don't worry, like, we voted and it went in your favor, and so, like, we told you about it, you know, like, we voted for you to know, so, like, congratulations. So that means he let loose that they voted.
Yeah. And
she asked who voted against her. And he told her Rhys and Amren. And she understood Rhys, because her and Rhys, like, don't get along. But she was really, really, really hurt to find out that Amren voted against her. Because at one time, Amren was, like, the only person that understood her and was, like, the only person that wasn't afraid of her.
Yeah.
So this was, like, still, like, it wasn't during training, but everyone was still there. So she sort of lied, and he was like, Nesta, like, you okay? She was like, I'm fine. And then she went to Emery and Gwyn, and they were like, are you okay? And she was like, I'm fine. And she wasn't fine. And she, like, left because it was the end of training. And she went to, like, she stopped in her room for a minute, but then she went right to the stairwell, and let out all of her pain and fury on the 10,000 steps. And she just couldn't believe that Amren, like, truly feared and hated her and, like, had given up on her at this point.
Yeah.
That's what that vote sort of meant in her brain. Mm-hmm. And she didn't even count the steps. She just felt rage upon rage upon rage, and she didn't stop until she hit the bottom. So, like, She made it. Yay.
Gonna go get a drink.
So no. She walks into the city and right down to Amren's apartment and barges in on Amren and Varian having sex. So. Yep. And she tells Varian to get out, and he does not. Instead, he stays, and sort of, like, he looks to Amren to be like, should I stay? Should I go? But that look hurts Nesta, because she knew that he would defend Amren to the death, right? And for Nesta, that person used to be Amren, who would defend her to the death. Like, defend her to all others. And the fact that she voted against her, it just sort of, like, it demonstrates that their connection has sort of been severed.
Yeah.
So, now we learn, I guess, what the whole fight was about, which it seems such a minor fight. Yeah. I don't understand how this caused, like, such a severe disconnect. But I guess the fight involved that Amren told Nesta that Feyre wanted them to start training again with her magic. But she refused. And Nesta twisted that into Amren choosing Feyre over her.
Yeah.
And, like, siding with her. Even though, like, Nesta's like, you know how I feel about Feyre. And, like, I don't know. And, like, she calls Feyre the sister that doesn't love her. Like, she doesn't think Nesta loves her.
Yeah.
And I guess Amren sort of disagrees and is like, Feyre obviously loves you, but Nesta, again, doesn't think she's deserving of Feyre's love. The same way that Tamlin wasn't deserving of Feyre's love. So I guess in the now, she points at Amren.
She loves pointing.
She's mad. She loves pointing. And again, Amren remembers what happened to the King of Hybern, the last person she pointed at. So she sort of subtly steps out of the line of fire, like steps away from the direction that she's pointing in.
Yeah.
And Amren legit says, like, you have power that you don't understand or respect. And Nesta interprets this as knowing what's best for her, and she's upset because she thought Amren was her friend, and, like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so, like, it just seems like such a silly argument to have created such a rift. Yeah. Not this current one with the vote, I get it. Yeah. But, like, the one on the barge, like, her wanting to Nesta, like, Feyre wanting Amren and Nesta to train, and Nesta being like, oh, you're taking Feyre's side.
When, like, realistically, Feyre could have been like, hey, I order you, as your high lady, to train Nesta again. Like, it's not even sides. It's like, that is her employer, basically. Like,
yep.
She's not, but Nesta has this very big complex now about, like, everybody choosing Feyre over her. And it's like, she's the high lady. Nobody else is as, not to use the same word, high in this court as she is. She's at the exact same level as Rhys. Like, what do you mean? Like, everybody's gonna choose her over you, and that's just how it is. Like,
yeah.
Even her friends are gonna choose the high lady over her because she's the fucking high lady.
If they have to.
Yeah. Jesus.
Anyway, so, like, I guess she says to Amren, like, you were my friend. And Amren's like, you don't even know the meaning of that word.
Yeah.
Which I'm just like, this maybe isn't the time.
Yeah.
Like, she's upset about you guys all voting about whether she should know something key about herself. And then Feyre barges in. So Nesta assumes that Cassian went right to Feyre and got Feyre. And is like, oh, there's him choosing Feyre over me.
Yeah.
Which is, like, obviously another blow to her. But Feyre's like, nope, Cass didn't come get her. So I'm like, did she just mind know? Did she just sense discord? Like, how...
Did Varian go get her?
No, he stayed in the room.
I thought he left at some point. I don't know.
Did he? Maybe he does, but...
Yeah, I don't... Maybe she sensed it. Maybe Amryn, called out her mind to mind somehow.
Maybe, yeah. Probably. So Feyre then, like, orders them to stop arguing.
That's gonna work. I love when someone tells you to calm down. That always helps.
Oh, yeah. Super helpful. And she orders Nesta to go back to the House of Wind.
Fuck right off.
Yep. And then she's like, Nesta, get back to the House of Wind. Amryn, maybe you should stay here. So, like, because the way they treated Amryn in the earlier books when she had all that power and was, like, this ulterior being, like, none of them wanted to make her too angry. So they didn't order her around. They just suggested that she do things.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess that is sort of it's hard for them to break that mentality. Yeah. Right?
And there's still some respect there, too.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, even though Amryn is not this very terrifying being anymore and is just like a normal high fae, they still, like, sort of are like, oh, we don't want to make you mad, so, like, I'm not gonna order you to do shit. I'm just gonna suggest that you, like, just stay here, maybe. And Nesta complains that, like, why isn't she ordering Amryn around?
Yeah.
Like,
true.
She's not an all-powerful being anymore. Why are you ordering me back to the house, but you're not ordering Amryn? And Feyre just says, like, Amryn is a trusted friend and has earned my respect.
Yeah.
And that really sets Nesta off, suggesting that, like, and I mean, I know she hasn't earned anyone's respect, but, like, still. Yeah. So this makes her drop a bomb that all of her trusted friends are keeping the truth from Feyre, and essentially just says, your baby is gonna kill you. And obviously that was a mistake on her part.
I do appreciate that she immediately is like, I shouldn't have said it like that.
Yes, yeah. So, like, she sees that, like, Feyre is, like, shocked and dismayed, and she, like, cradled her belly, and looked at the baby in her belly, and sort of Nesta realized that, like, Feyre already loves this unborn baby more than their mother ever loved any of them. Yeah. And, like, she's ashamed that she told her this way, and she sort of immediately understands, shit, I took it too far.
Mm. Which is a very sibling thing. Yeah. Like, oh, I didn't mean to get that nasty, sorry.
Yeah. Like all those times I told my sister she was a mistake.
Sorry, Heather, if you're listening.
So Cassian, we go to his point of view now really quick. He followed Nesta's scent, like, down the stairs and out into the city, but, like, obviously lost it in the hubbub of town. Mm-hmm. So he goes to the river house, and Rhys is there, and obviously he already knows that Nesta told Feyre, and he's, like, beyond furious. Mm-hmm. His eyes are apparently, like, black and murderous, and essentially tells Cass to get Nesta out of the city before he kills her. So,
yeah. Like, maybe you should have told your mate yourself.
Yeah, maybe. So he flies into the city, and he's, like, checking around, and he actually finds her running down a side street. So he just, like, literally grabs her, like, bridal style, flies to the house. They don't even land. Asriel is, like, flapping his wings, holding, like, a bag of supplies, like a pack, and Cass just, like, grabs it with a hand and, like, flies away. And Nesta sort of, like, doesn't know where they're going or anything, but she knows that what she did was terrible, and she, like, deserves to be misted by Rhys. Mm-hmm. And, like, she didn't even want Cassian to save her. Yeah. So he lands somewhere out in the wilderness. And he doesn't say much, but, like, what he does say is really cold. And, like, he's really mad at her too, right? For telling Feyre that in that way. But, like, Nesta obviously misinterprets his sort of how he feels and thinks that, like, obviously he hates her now and, like, he's really cold to her and whatever. So she literally, he's, like, starts a fire and starts, like, unpacking their stuff, and she literally goes as far away physically as she can and, like, curls up on the ground to go to sleep, and she's just listening to the logs snap and crack. And Cassian is actually looking up at the stars when Feyre mind speaks with him, and she thinks Rhys overreacted about, like, sending them away. And even though, like, Cassian is furious at Nesta for telling Feyre isn't, because at least she told Feyre the truth. Even though it wasn't to inform her, it was to hurt her. Yeah. Like, it wasn't done out of love, it was done to hurt her the way she hurt. At least she had the decency to tell her. And she wanted to know.
Of course. I'd want to know if I was dying. Like...
Yeah. And, like, Cassian is just surprised that she's so chill about the whole thing. And she's like, no, I'm going to fight for my son, and I am not going to let him feel panic. So, good for you. She's being very mothery.
Even though she's a fucking child herself.
Not yet a mother. Yes. Yeah.
Who never had a childhood. I can't. Yeah. Can't. Cool.
Cool, yeah. So she also tells him, too, that, like, Rhys understands that he overreacted with sending them away and says, like, you guys come home. You need to come home. But Cass is like, no, I think we're going to stay in camp and, like, for a few days, and we'll do some hiking and stuff. And she's like, Nesta's going to hate hiking. And he's like, yeah, it'll be her punishment. And I'm like, what the fuck? You are punishing her like she is a small child. She is a grown woman.
Yeah.
Did she make a bad choice? Yes, but we don't punish adults, like, for making bad decisions like that. Unless you're a criminal and then you go to jail. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, this just seems so, like, oh, this is her punishment. Like, again, they're deciding something without her.
And, like, she's already punishing herself enough. Like, she doesn't need a punishment. And, like, obviously, it doesn't turn out being a punishment, of course. And I'm sure he mostly said it as a joke, but, like...
Not cool, man.
No, that's... Yeah, I don't like it.
No. So the next morning, he is, like, really cold to her and terse, and, like, he just, like, he has no warmth. Like, he doesn't speak to her with any sort of kindness. He just, like, tosses her a meal, essentially. And he says, we're gonna hike from dawn until dusk. We're only gonna stop for lunch. So, like, eat, take care of your needs, do whatever you need to do now. Also, he's like, you're carrying the pack, because I can't because of my wings. And you're washing the dishes. But you gotta wait and wash them at lunch, because we don't have time for you to do it now. So, like, he is just going to punish her through physical labor, essentially. Yeah. So, like, she doesn't really care what he does. She's like, he can work her into the ground. It's not going to fix her. So, yeah.
Well, it's kind of, I know you brought up, like, prison and shit, but, like, earlier. But it is true that, like, in most situations, obviously there are people that are in prison that probably deserve to be there. But in most situations, it's better to have, like, rehabilitation and, like, getting help. And, like, Nesta doesn't need to be punished here. She needs help. She's very depressed and she hates herself. She doesn't need more punishment on top of that. So it is kind of funny. Like, I'm not over the punishment part either. Sorry.
But on top of that, too, it's like, what have they been doing with the training? That's been physical exertion. Like, and that has not done anything to help heal her mentally. So, like, how is more physical exertion going to fix that when that's what they've been doing?
Yeah.
And it's done nothing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they walk in silence for hours until they stop at a river. Cass, again, like, barely says anything to her. He just tells her she has 30 minutes to rest. He gives her a canteen and tells her to fill it, because if she fainted, she could fall off a mountain with exhaustion. Because that's what they're doing. They're essentially going up and down mountains.
Yeah.
Like, but she didn't even look at him, and she thinks, like, good. Like, no, if you faint, you'll fall off a mountain with exhaustion, and she's like, good.
Yeah.
So, like, it just interprets, like, she wants to die at this point.
Yeah.
And he sort of sees that look in her eye. Again, this whole, like, oh, I know what you're thinking based on the look on your face. And he's like, oh, I didn't realize she was that, quote unquote, unwell.
Yeah.
As in, like, he didn't know she was mentally so, like, hurt and broken that she wanted to die.
Yeah.
And he sort of knows that the only person that can save her is herself, which I see where he's coming from, but I also don't. And, like, I don't see how you being a cold, like, asshole is going to help her.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, they continue on, and Cassian wonders if these mountains would be enough to help her. Because obviously the Illyrian ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I know. It's a thing.
Yeah.
So they stop, and she nearly passes out with exhaustion, and she thinks she deserves that he's not talking to her.
Well, that's the other thing, is, like, she's taking his silence as a punishment, too. Like, she's taking all of this as punishment that she deserves, and you're like, that's not how we heal people.
No. So they continue like this for 2 days. Him not talking to her except to, like, say, stop, rest. 30 minutes. Like, he doesn't say anything else. And, like, she's neglecting herself. She doesn't really eat a lot. She's not hydrating as she walks because she doesn't want to stop and get her canteen and, like, show that weakness. Yeah. And she also, like, she knows that if she stops walking to, like, grab her canteen, the thoughts of what she has done and how worthless she is come back in her brain. So, like, she is, like, sort of physically exerting herself so that she doesn't think about how awful she thinks she is. So they obviously are heading down a mountain, and because she's not hydrating, she faints and falls. And Cassian, who's been walking in front of her this entire time, not looking back, finally looks back and sees that she fainted, and he freaks out. And he notices that her lips are super dry and, like, white little crusties on the side, and she's flushed, and so he makes her drink water until she wakes up. And he just tells her that she needs to be drinking water. And even though he wants to comfort her, he's cold and distant instead. And he thinks that she just needs one more mountain. So she doesn't really say anything back to him, and she hasn't really spoken to him since they got there. But he knows when she finally does speak, he's going to have to be ready for it. And he thinks that she's going to, like, flip the fuck out in a, like, angry way. So they keep going mile after mile, and she knows that no amount of driving her body would make her a good person. And she wished that Cassian was sort of a huntsman bringing her out here to cut out her heart. So, like, sort of a Snow White situation. Yeah. She really wants to die.
Yeah. She is not loving herself.
She is not in a good place.
No.
So she thinks that she was born wrong because she was born with claws, and, like, she can't hide the part of her that loves and hates violently. And, like, she just doesn't remember a time when she hasn't been angry. So, like, she sort of feels like maybe she adopted her mother's disdain. Because she said, like, even before her mother died, she had this, like, sort of anger in her. And she just compares herself. She says she's no better than a rabid dog. And she thinks about how she didn't count the stairs yesterday. And, like, does that count? Like, the fact that she didn't count the stairs and that she made it down the stairs, like, does that even count? And then she's like, do I even count? Yeah. Am I even worth counting?
Mm-hmm.
And this thought, for some reason, really, it breaks the dam. And, like, as they finally make it up to where they were aiming to go, this, like, beautiful lake nestled in between some mountains, she finally breaks down and sobs at the idea of being worth anything. And she just lets every terrible thought wash over her, and, like, she knows she can't outrun the guilt. But Cassian is there, and, like, he tries to comfort her, and she just tells him not to be nice to her.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, why? And she couldn't find an answer to that question, so she just lets out that she let him die, referring to her dad. And she thinks, like, she didn't stop it, and she hated him her whole life, but he loved her anyways, and she just, like, let him die. And she didn't deserve his love, and she can't undo it, she can't fix it, and she can't fix what she said to Feyre. And he tries to tell her, like, your dad's death was not your fault, but, like, she doesn't believe any of it. She thinks, like, she should have used the power that she had. Because she did have the power, she just never trained to use it.
Yeah, and since then hasn't trained either.
Right. So she also tells him, like, the reason she can't stand fire, because it sounds like her dad's neck snapping, and it's torture for her. And then she says she feels guilty about sending Feyre into the woods, but, like, she was so incredibly angry and wanted their father to prove he wasn't a terrible person. But then she thinks of Elaine going into the cauldron, Elaine being kidnapped, and her father dying, and now Feyre's face after she told her about the baby. Like, she thinks of those particular moments every time she closes her eyes, and she feels guilt for all of them, and that they are all her fault. So it's a lot.
It's a lot to feel.
It is a lot to feel. And, like, she even says, like, she hates that she does those things. She hates that she says those things. But she can't let this, like, barrier down and be weak in front of others. Mm-hmm. So she bites back instead. And, like, she says she can't bear to be in her own head and see everything over and over. And, like, essentially she doesn't deserve love. She deserves nothing. And then he tells her that, like, he feels guilt too. Like, he feels guilty that he failed. He feels like he failed his mother. Mm-hmm. He feels like he failed Rhys when he was captured by Amarantha. And sometimes he believes it when Eris and Devlin call him a bastard and, like, call him down to the dirt. He believes those things. But, like, and he thinks he also doesn't deserve stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
But he does tell her that, like, she'll get through to the other side of this, like, pain and self-loathing only if she's willing to fight. And that, like, while those things might never go away, there is a better side to be on. And he just says, like, you're so brave. You just have to apply that bravery to your own journey. But, like, also, that doesn't mean you have to become this, like, simpering, like, soft, docile female. Like, keep being sharp and bold and fearless, but, like, help yourself through the journey so that you stop hurting yourself and others.
Yeah.
And she just, like, lets everything out and just, like, cries and cries. And then we go to Cassian's point of view, and he's only now realizing all the times she flinched at a fire was because she heard her father's neck snapping. Yeah. And, like, he remembers last year at the solstice party, they had, like, a massive fire burning all night. And, like, that was the night when she, like, freaked out and called him down to the dirt and wasn't very nice to him. Yeah. But, like, she was really gaunt and pale. And it's because she literally kept hearing that over and over again.
Yeah.
This week, he had built so many fires while they were hiking, and she curled as far away as she could from it. And at the blacksmith's, she actually asked to go to a quieter room away from the fire. Like, he's now putting two and two together. And he said even he didn't realize how much she'd been suffering.
Yeah.
So, his answer, he pulls out his Illyrian sword, and he gives it to her to do some combinations, because I guess for him, the training has always helped him come back to center. So she does, like, I guess they call it the 8-point star maneuver. I don't really understand what it is, but she does it, and, like, it makes her feel, like, complete. And, like, each maneuver is perfect, and she feels clarity with these movements.
Yeah, I wonder how many points starred is her tattoo and all that crap. Is it, like, related in some way?
I think it is. I think it is an 8-point star.
Yeah. I wonder, but I think, like, the 8-point star is just, like, where you stand and the ways you move, but it is interesting that they're all, but it kind of puts in, like, that Nesta needs this training and she is maybe meant to be a commander, kind of like I think you said last week. Like, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. So I guess they stay out there a few days longer, but then they finally get back, and she is training with Emery and Gwyn again, and they ask about, like, what went down. And Nesta's like, not much. And they're like, you're saying you didn't, like, have sex a shit ton out there by yourselves hiking? And she's like, well, yes. So she sort of said, like, after 5 days of silence, like, the last 2 or 3, they did a lot of fucking.
Yeah.
So they actually have a huge log set up now in the training ring, and they've tied a white ribbon around it. And I guess it's sort of like they've tied it, I don't really understand how, but they've tied it, like, vertically.
I just assumed.
So that it flutters in the wind.
I just assumed it was hanging.
Yeah, but, like, logs go this way, so, like...
Yeah. Is it like a log and then a branch?
A branch? Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know either. Anyway, so they have this ribbon hanging vertically. So Gwyn has sort of discovered that part of Valkyrie training is being able to cut the ribbon in 2 pieces with 1 slice. And that's a sign that your training is complete. And Cass agrees that it's a good sign that you are competent. So they ask, like, who's first? So I just think it's funny that they make Emery do it.
Yeah.
Because she's the oldest.
I love it. They're just like, you.
Yeah, it's like, you're the oldest. Here you go. So, like, it's very sistery.
Yeah.
So she obviously doesn't manage to do it. It's, I guess they think it's, like, harder than they expect it to be. And then at the end, like, Cass demonstrates that he can cut it, just to sort of be like,
it's possible.
I'm not all talk.
Yeah.
So, like, after training, her and Cassian, like, fuck against a desk, and it's, like, it's pretty hot. What happened to working in the library? Like, I thought she only had an hour in between, and then she had to be at the library, so I guess they worked that in the middle.
Yeah.
But, so the rest of the week, she keeps trying the stairs again, but she never makes it to the bottom. Like, she didn't succeed again, and she's, like, kind of worried about it, I guess.
Yeah.
But she just throws herself into training. So they're using shields now. And, like, none of them ever cut the ribbon, but they try at the beginning of practice and at the end of practice. Mm-hmm. And at night, she takes Cass to her bed, like, every night. But they never slept together. Even though she wants him to stay, she never asks. One day she's with Gwyn and asks about her evening services.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, like, the priestesses do evening, I'm calling it mass, but it's a service, like a holy service.
Yeah.
And she sort of takes a step and admits, like, Nesta admits that she's been in a really bad place since the war, and she's done a lot of shitty things, but one of the reasons she chose to frequent all the bars and pleasure halls was because of the music, which she really loves. So she just feels like she really needs some music right now.
Yeah.
And Gwyn says, like, she's welcome to come and that she understands what it's like to fail those you love. And she worries about her and Emery hearing Gwyn's story and looking at her differently. But she doesn't think differently of Nesta, and she will always be welcome in her eyes. So she goes to the service that night, And Gwyn is actually one of the priestesses up on the dais and like one of the lead singers. And they lead the priestesses in prayer and song, and like Nesta thinks that it's beautiful and glorious, and like Gwyn is this amazing singer, and the music actually lulls Nesta into like an almost trance. And the lyrics are like ancient, and I don't know what they mean. I sort of wondered at first if they were a spell, like by accident.
Oh yeah, could be,
because she was made, so like maybe the lyrics were interpreted differently to her, but I don't, it's not covered, so I think I was wrong in that assumption. But all of a sudden, like, she's hearing the music, and in her mind, she's, like, racing towards a mountain and past a gate towards, like, terrible living things. So, like, I think the assumption is that it's the prison. And her consciousness just passes by, like, terrifying evil creatures and passes through doors that were not doors. So, like, secret rooms. And she finds the harp sitting at the center. And she sort of clues in then, like, because before, when all of this was happening, she didn't really acknowledge what was happening.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So she realizes that her own bones and the stones of the mountains helped her scry and find the location of the harp without having to, like, throw the bones and stones onto a map sort of situation.
Yeah, and she didn't get lost in it, which I think is good.
Key. Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh shit, she's just gonna be in a trance forever now, I guess.
Yeah. So the harp, like, speaks to her that it wants to play so they can open doors together and blah, blah, blah. And then the priestesses end the song, which actually ends her vision immediately. And she sort of, like, collapses a little bit in the pew. And they all sort of look at her, but, like, she stands again and, like, finishes the service. But then she immediately goes and tells Cassian what happened. And then Cassian tells Rhys what happened. And Rhys actually tells Cassian that they have an extra shield around the prison. The same way he has that shield around Feyre. So, like, tomorrow, Cassian and Nesta need to go to the prison. Because, like, but he needs them to wait until tomorrow because he has to, like, untangle them. And they want to do it fast because Nesta sort of, like, woke the harp up. So they're worried that, like, it's gonna start opening doors of the prison. So he also has the idea for Nesta to take the great sword she made to see what it could do. And Nesta is, like, shocked Rhys gave her the sword. But, like, Cassian is like, remember the rules of the prison. Like, don't talk to anyone, don't look at anyone, don't talk to anything, don't look at anything, just find the harp. So they go the next morning to get the harp. So they descend through the prison, and Nesta sort of feels bad that Amren spent so much time there. And then she starts to feel even worse about how she's treated Amren. And she feels really bad that Amren has spent thousands of years in the prison and found Nesta abhorrent, which, like, says something. Like, she's like, I am worse than these creatures that are here. If she can survive thousands of years here and thinks of me terribly, that says something bad about me. So, like, they descend through the prison and make it to where Nesta feels the harp is, and it's, like, hidden behind, like, invisible rock.
Yeah,
that's not really the right way to say it. It looks like rock, but she can put her hand through, and it's like there's nothing there.
Just walks right through it. You're like, okay.
And, like, I feel like Cassian just sort of looks at a door and is like, Lanthus, which is, like, one of the monsters he put in there who's, like, truly immortal, can't be killed, is really, like, gave him some scars and was one of the monsters that he told Nesta about. So I guess his cell is, like, right next door. Yeah. So they walk in through this, like, invisible rock thing. And there's, like, this hallway with, like, a chamber that they have to navigate. And they're not sure if there are, like, spells in there or, like, traps the same way, I don't know, the same, like, the cauldron stuff, like, or, like, the Book of Spells when they went to get it in the summer court. Like, it was spelled. Yeah. So they're worried that something like that is there too. But Nesta thinks that the harp will let her pass because like calls to like. But she's like, you'll alert it to your presence. So, like, you have to stay in this hallway just in case his presence, like, sets off the traps. So she passes through the wards and says they feel, like, ancient, like pre-prison. And Cassian then, like, mentions maybe the prison was built here on purpose to hide the harp's power.
Interesting.
Like something else.
Yes.
And maybe by somebody who predates the High Lords. In case you didn't understand, we are humming at the fact that this is relevant to Crescent City. And then says that maybe there's, like, an 8th court. Like, Cassian's like, I think there was an 8th court at some point. So again,
yes.
You know, considering there's a dawn court, there's a day court, there's a night court, and yet there's no dusk court. Anyway, so apparently there are, like, runes and markings all over the ground, and, like, Nesta feels like she's been called here by something really, like, vast. Like, more vast than the harp itself, more vast than her power, like, something really, like universal. And she touches the harp, and she has a vision of it being used the last time. Apparently Fae are screaming and pleading for their children's sakes, begging to be let out. And they're, like, clawing at stone where a door had been, but the way back was sealed. So again, Crescent City reference. Yeah. So the next vision is her at a palace with 6 thrones. And in the center is Brialyn wearing a golden crown on her head. So confirming that Brialyn does indeed have the crown trove. And she speaks to Nesta and sort of taunts her and is like, I know who your friends are. I know where you are right now. And just that, like, this, like, darkness erupts and she hears a male, like, bellowing her name. And she comes to and sees Cass, but he obviously can't get through the wards to reach her. And she realized that, like, by touching the harp, she sort of opened a doorway between her and Brialyn's mind. And, like, she has to let go so that Brialyn doesn't see anymore. Yeah. And she asks the harp to let go, like, let her go. But the harp sort of teases her for a bit and is like, oh, think about all we could do. And, like, play one of my strings and we could, like, conquer, like, universes and blah, blah, blah. But eventually tells her, like, how to unlock the wards and cut the connection with Brialyn, like, tells her which strings to pluck. And she thinks that the memory that it showed her was someone locking people and their children into the stone. We know different.
Yeah, we understand
what actually, yeah. So she gets back to Cassian and they go to leave. And she tells Cassian that she actually named the sword Ataraxia. It's, like, from an old Fae language. And he's like, cool. And then they go to leave, and they see that the door to the Lanthus' cell is open. Dun, dun, dun!
Like, of course it is. Of course the harp didn't just open the wards. It opened something else.
Why not?
Exactly. The harp is a rascally fellow. We go to...
It is a rascal.
So yeah, it's Cassian's point of view, and he thinks that he knows 2 things. And, like, this is a common thing that Sarah J. Maas does of, like, Rune Danon knew 3 things with certainty or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was hot. But anyway.
You know nothing.
Yeah. So he knows 2 things. He's going to die, and he needs to save Nesta. Lanthus is, like, talking to him and being a dick, and he says that Cassian was clever with the Ash Mirror, but Lanthus is immortal, and he found a way to escape. And Cassian's like, I think it was the harp. It wasn't him. But he also just starts to wonder, like, are all of the cells in here open now? Like, did the harp open everything? Because that would have been bad. Lanthus asks what Nesta is, and she says a witch from Orid's dark heart. And he tries to, like, scent her, but he's like, he can't scent Orid on her. And he says it's a shame that her scent is marred with Cassian's, because he hates Cassian, blah, blah, blah. Also, he can't tell what she is. He also brings up the harp, because he could feel that it was near him, and he kind of wondered who would be here. And he says, like, he kind of says, like, the last string is for death blows, and he's kind of, like, just taunting them, but then he also says to them that, like, based on Cassian and Nesta's scent, they must be. And then Cassian attacks him, and we're like, what was he gonna say? Mm-hmm. So Cassian is attacking, and he tells Nesta to run. We go to Nesta's point of view, and she fucking beats it. She runs. She's gone. And I kind of love it. I love that she's like, yeah, she kind of does need to run. Like, what else is she gonna do? Fair.
Help him fight with her sword?
Nope. Run. But then she's kind of thinking, like, what is her plan? Like, if she gets out of the prison, she needs to try to mind speak to Rhys to get him to get there. And then Rhys needs to run through the entire prison, too. Because, like, they're at the bottom, at the last door. They go through the... So, like, there's not enough time. And she thinks, like, she needs to go back to save Cassian, because he could be dead or dying by now. So the harp heats up in her hand, and there are 26 strings on the harp, and she remembers, apparently Gwyn said Meryl found out that there are 26 dimensions, which is interesting. But she thinks, like, earlier she used 1 string to get rid of the wards and open that door. So she said, and she knows that the harp had said that the small strings are for games, light movement, and leaping. So she's trying to figure out, like, what she should do, and 10 Autumn Court soldiers run towards her, and she knows that Briallen must have, like, felt her get the harp and sent them to get the harp off of her. So Nesta fires up her power, and she plucks the first string and thinks about getting back to Cassian, and she, like, jumps through time and space and ends up next to him. He's battling hard, but Lanthus cannot be killed, only contained, is what we've heard about him. And the harp can't kill, so she's just like, I'm gonna grab Cassian, pluck another string on the harp, and get us the fuck away from here. And then we can leave, like, somebody else can deal with Lanthus, basically. So that's her plan, but then Lanthus is missed, because, like, he's just missed at this moment. He's not a real form.
He's not corporeal.
Yeah, which I didn't really understand up until, like, this moment. Because when he was talking to them earlier, I was like, oh, he's probably, like, a shape of something. But nope, he's just mist.
Mm-hmm.
But his mist hits Cassian, and Cassian, like, slams into the wall, and Nesta's like, shit. And then it throws her into the wall, and she is luckily next to Cassian, and she can tell that he's breathing. And she thinks, like, she's been here before with Cassian's head in her lap and death coming for them. And at that time, she gave up, but not this time. So she draws her sword, and Lanthus screams, and the blade glows. The blade glows, and it kind of makes him solidify into, like, a corporeal form of a solid, beautiful, and naked man. Yeah.
Yikes. Just a penis.
I know.
Like,
that's all I can think about, but it's, like, never brought up. But, like, I don't, it's not necessary that he's naked, but it was mentioned, so I say it. He says that, like, this sword isn't Narbin, and
which is that one that Amarantha had earlier, but couldn't use, so threw it in the ocean.
So, like, clearly he knows something about that it's made, and the swords in general, and, like, what ones are on Earth. But she says, no, it's Ataraxia, and he laughs at the name, and he asks what death god she is, and whose fire is in her veins. And she says he knows, and he says it's not possible, but that they actually heard of her down here. And he actually says her name, like, he knows her by name. He calls her Nesta. And he knows that she took this power from the cauldron. He then, like, implants visions in her head, and he shows her what they could be. So they're, like, on thrones, and she's got, like, a crown and is ruling, and there's, like, giant black beasts at the foot of the throne, and the sword and mask are there. And there's also a fourth veiled item, and all she can see is age-worn bone. And this will come up also in Crescent City if you read it. So she also sees that Lanthus is wearing the crown. So, like, even in this vision,
like the trove, crown, not just a crown.
Like, so even in this vision where he is trying to tell her, like, what they could be together, she can tell, like, his greed and his intentions are to rule through force, and, like, by force, I mean, like, forcing people's minds to do what they, like, what they don't want to do kind of thing. So, like, he's kind of showing his hand, and it kind of, like, takes her out of the vision a bit, but then it goes to a new vision, and it's them having sex, and she's like, she's never known such pleasure, and, like, he comes inside of her, and it's like, she's thinking of, like, the powerful child they're gonna create, and I'm like, this is disgusting and assaulty and not okay.
But also in the vision, it's not against her will.
Yeah. She's,
like, she mentions that she knows the crown could not be used against her.
Yeah,
like,
it's not,
the crown could not influence her.
Yeah, so she is in this different future. Like, this is what she wants. It's just icky. But she starts to think, like, she has had better sex than what he's showing her with Cassian, so it kind of, like, takes her out of the vision. And she starts to, like, crowd him back towards his cell again, but he says he'll get out again, and she will be his queen. And she distracts him, and Cassian throws a dagger into his chest, and then she chops off his head. And strange black blood comes out of his body. And I'm just like, black blood? We know black blood. We've heard of black blood before. This is interesting.
We have?
I wonder if there's a correlation.
We have!
Oh, not in this book. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's Throne of Glass.
Exactly. So I wonder if there's, like, is he one of them?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
The implications!
Connections!
Yeah. It's wild.
Connections abound.
So she then thinks, like, what could not be killed was killed by her sword and her power. So, like, that's profound. Like, clearly this weapon is more than just... It's obviously, like, a trove item, which we kind of knew, but, like, you know, it kills what can't be killed. And that is something that is said about another sword in this series. So...
in this series?
Yeah, didn't they say that Gwydion or whatever?
Gwydion?
Yeah, that sword can kill what cannot be killed, I think. I think they said that last week, or maybe they say it a little later this week. But, It's set in Crescent City as well. So they hear the soldiers coming now, and obviously Cassian is not doing super great. So they can't fight off 10 Autumn Court soldiers. And they also hear, like, screaming in the prison, because the prisoners are afraid of the sword, because they know that, like, I guess most of the inmates in this prison are, like,
long-living,
beings that
immortal-ish.
Yeah, beings that can't really be killed by normal weapons, so they're afraid of the sword. So Nesta does what she has to do. She uses 3 strings on the harp, and she thinks of Feyre's house, and she, like, just lands on their front lawn, which I just think is kind of funny. Rhys bursts out of the house just as, like, Cassian collapses. So they bring him inside, and Nesta sees Feyre, and it's the first time they've seen each other since she told her. And she tries to, like, it's not really the time to have this conversation, but she's, like, trying to let Feyre know with her, like, eyes, I guess, that she's sorry. But Feyre answers in her mind, because we know that she can mind speak, but everyone keeps forgetting it. And Nesta, she just answers and says, like, don't worry about it. But Nesta tells her, like, she spoke in anger and is sorry for, like, telling her like that. And Feyre just says she forgives her, so they're fine. As fine as they can be. So everybody talks about, like, the harp and how the harp can actually break wards, because, like, they have wards around this house, and Nesta was able to get here, and there's also wards around the prison, and she was just able to, like, pop out of the prison. So, like, that's not good. They need to keep it out of their enemies' hands, or they'll just be able to go wherever they want. And they kind of, like, I guess she's told them about it, and, like, clearly the harp has its own will and likes mischief. So Rhys is just like, we need to lock it up with the mask. And Feyre's like, we should not put them anywhere near each other, because who knows how they will interact with each other. And also, if someone finds one, they'll find both of them. So, like, they should be locked up separately, which makes sense. Maja had come to heal Cass's broken arm and a hairline fracture, but he still needs to kind of take it easy. And Nesta starts, I guess, telling them kind of what she saw, but she says, like, the last person who used the harp did something awful and trapped a whole bunch of people. So...
Wonder who that could have been.
Learn more about that in Crescent City 3. She also said that, like, Lanthus brought up the wild hunt in his vision to her, and how, like, they'll rule the world again with it. And she kind of asks,
what that is.
Because, like, we've never heard of that before. And we get the history of, I guess, this whole world, but the history of the Daglin. So they ruled and were vicious for millennia, and they drained the world. Some legends claimed that a Fey soldier, Finn, I think it is, rose up with Gwydion, which we did hear about before, but it is a sword that was dipped in the cauldron, and they overthrew the Daglin. And he unified the territories and was the first and only High King. But he was betrayed by his queen and his dearest friend and general. So, interesting.
Yeah, again, Crescent City. The Crescent City references in this are, like, severe.
Yeah, they really are. So, his queen and his general stole his weapons, and that's all that's really known about that. After the High King, that is when, like, the court systems rose and they developed High Lords. Feyre asks if Amren would remember this, but she came to this world just after the Daglin had been defeated, I guess, and was put away before Finn was killed. So she wouldn't know where, like, she wouldn't know about the weapons or, like, any of that stuff. She was imprisoned by that time. So Narbin is... She also asks about Narbin because, like, he was like, that's not Narbin. But Narbon is a death sword that's lost or destroyed, and it's the one, that Amarantha just threw away because she's a villain. But stories say that it could slay even Lanthus, and Nesta's like, yeah, so her sword is kind of the same. Like, her sword, first it bound him into a physical form, like it made him change from the mist, and then she was able to kill him. We finally get now to the actual original question of the Wild Hunt. And the Wild Hunt were like the Daglin's minions, and they kept Fae and humans in line. Which I found kind of interesting, and it reminded me, and just skip ahead like 30 seconds if you haven't read Crescent City, but like it reminded me of the like all of the H people in Crescent City. Like, are they the Wild Hunt for the Asteri? Like the Harpy, the Hind, the blah 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 blah, like those main.
Oh yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying.
And also like the Dread Wolves and stuff, like they're the Wild Hunt, and so like there's so many similarities. You're like,
yes, yeah.
But anyway,
there are so many. I feel like if we even dove deeper, we could find so many more connections than we were actually mentioning. It's just these are the ones that stand out. So like, imagine what you could do if you actually like went really deep into it, what you would find.
Yeah. And we're also like trying not to spoil Crescent City too much if you're just reading this book. So like, if we aren't bringing up specific things, that's kind of why. And also, we didn't like do up a string crazy board to like connect everything.
Although, how fun would that be?
I would love it.
It'd be so fun.
So Nesta then explains like that Lanthus gave her visions. She doesn't mention the sex one, of course, but she just says like the hounds that were at the bottom of her throne remind her of like the decor in the Hewn City. So like they had hounds on the walls and stuff. And she also mentions, of course, the fourth object, which was made of ancient bone. And she says like she guesses the next step is to go after the crown. But they kind of like leave it a bit. Cass says he should have realized that there were more soldiers. Like Eris kind of told them that like there was more than 24 when he was like, we met 24 of them and we had to kill them. He's like, I guess Eris was like, there's more than that. But Cassian was just like, I don't know. He disregarded it kind of, and he thinks that he failed. And Nesta kind of wants to comfort him because she's like, he's so hard on himself. But Feyre kind of comforts him with words. She's like, well, Eris spews so much shit. How are you supposed to know what's true? And like, he really respects his family, I guess. Like, he really expects her, Feyre's opinion, and it helps him feel better. Rhys also thinks they should go for the crown, but Feyre says, like, they fucked up so bad when they tried to go after the cauldron, and they can't just fly into the same situation and screw themselves over again. And he's like, we're smarter now. And I'm like,
we can learn from our mistakes.
Like, can you? Do you think that?
I don't think you can.
I don't either. So they kind of decide not to, and they say they need to secure and repair alliances so that, like, if a war does come, they're not screwed. Rhys says Eris is likely... Okay. We kind of get into this whole plot, and I'm like, what the fuck is the point of this? But anyway. Rhys says Eris is likely worried after Tamlin found them, so he wants to use Nesta to secure the alliance with Eris. And he says that Elaine mentioned that she won a duke with dancing, and he wants her to seduce Eris.
But not, like, sexual.
No, but, like, she wants to be, like, appealing enough that he'll be like, ooh, I want her. There's something out of this alliance that I could get and benefit from. And you're like, how does this make any sense? So, we're, like, I'm pretty sure we're in Cassian's point of view. I don't know. Maybe not. But anyway, he fucking hates that idea. He's annoyed.
Of course he does.
Reese explains it by saying, like, Eris is coming to their winter solstice party, and he is going to expect to dance with a lady of the court. But it can't be Feyre, because she has a baby, so she can't spin. And I'm like, what the fuck? But okay.
For the love of God.
It can't be more because of their past, obviously. Amryn would just kill him anyway. And it can't be Elaine because reasons. Sure. It would actually make more sense to, although...
For it to be Elaine?
Because, like...
But I guess, Elaine is too sweet and innocent, and they don't want to throw her to the mean old Eris.
That's exactly it, but I'm like, it would make more sense. Because she's not currently trying to figure her shit out with someone. Although, she should be, I guess. I can't. Anyway, we're not getting into this. But... It would be shitty, though, if Eris was like, yes, I want Elaine, and then his brother is Elaine's mate. That'd be dicey. If they brought that up as the reason why Elaine can't do it, then sure. But,
yeah.
They don't.
They don't.
It's just because she's too precious. Feyre warns Nesta that, like, Eris isn't good. She's like, he's not as bad as Baron, but, like, he's not a good male. And we're like, we don't really know anything about him. Like, you can't just generalize, but okay. No. And Nesta's kind of like, yeah, I know what he did to Moore. Like, I am aware. And she just says, like, she can deal with him. And they tell her Moore is going to teach her the dances. And Cassian just cuts in and is like, no, we didn't. This is not a good idea. But Nesta's just like, sure, I'll do it. And I just don't understand where they think this is going, but fine. Nesta just says she'll meet with Moore whenever she's available. And then she gives the sword back. And Feyre says she can keep it, but she says she has no interest in Moore death. So, fair. I also wonder if, like, she can, like, call the sword to her now because it has her magic.
Ooh, that would be cool. That would be fun.
Worry about it, like, going through the streets at death, like, stabbing people on the way. So bad.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So later that night, she ends up mind stilling, and she ends up, like, feeling contented in her own head, and it's like, I don't think she gets that way super often. Like, obviously, she mind stills a lot. I think she does it every morning and every evening. But, like, she actually is able to, like, be at peace, which I think is rare.
Yes.
Which isn't surprising. I guess the next day, Asriel winnows Cassian and Nesta to the cottage from ACOSF, so where they were poor. And he promises to come back in an hour. And we're in Nesta's point of view, and she's kind of wondering why she even wanted to come here. So she walks up to the door, and obviously there are claw marks, and Cassian is like, oh, Tamlin's handiwork, is it? And she's like, yes. And she thinks of how, like, she and Elaine had to rehang it, and her father was just, like, sitting there telling them that what they're doing wrong, and, like, that annoying third person when you have a task and they're to, like, mansplain it to you, and you're like, just leave me alone, I can do this. So that's how he was acting. So she opens the door and she feels embarrassed, but Cassian can, like, kind of tell that she feels embarrassed, and you're kind of like, maybe there's something more here, because no person, like, there's no way a regular person would be like, oh, look at that person standing in front of me, not even looking at me, is clearly embarrassed. Like, anyway. Obviously, there has to be something more. Because Cassian then says, like, just a brute, remember? And he says, like, he's lived in worse. So she walks in and he goes with her, and she says, like, there used to be a roof in here. So, like, clearly the place has gone downhill.
I'm surprised that no one has, like,
I was
taken
too.
it over. Like, you would think that, like, even though it's not great, you would think that there are people in less fortunate circumstances that would be like, empty house?
Exactly.
Mine.
And, like, they were even, in ACOTAR, they had even said, like, when Claire Better's house burnt down, they were like, people are scavenging shit from it. And you're like, that house was burnt. Why didn't anybody come here? Don't know. So they're kind of going around, and he sees Feyre's art everywhere, and he asks about the dresser, because he had heard about it, and she shows him, and he's still surprised that, like, Feyre had painted stars for herself before she even knew about the Night Court and, like, what was coming for her. And she painted flames for Nesta, and that's telling. Some foreshadowing that Feyre had.
Oh, yes. And yet Elaine just got flowers.
Of course. What is that going to come to mean? That she loves gardening. Okay.
One-dimensional character.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll get more, but we'll see.
I know we will. I'm just mad about it right now.
So Nesta kind of sees, like, a pair of her old shoes in the corner, and they have, like, holes in them, and she kind of gets a bit of, like, a flashback of having to walk around in them and stuff, and she just, like, leaves that room because she's like, it was a hard time. So she's in the main room, and she looks to the mantle, and she sees her father's wood figurines, and there's a bear there, and Cassian is looking at them too, and he's like, oh, he had some talent. And she says, yeah, not enough though. And she thinks she's gonna vomit because, like, obviously this is affecting her a lot. But she manages to, like, mind still and, like, center herself, basically. There's actually a rose on the mantle too, and she says, like, he made it for Elaine since she missed the flowers in the winter. One-dimensional. 100%. And he asks if her father ever made her one, but she says, like, he knew better than to make her one because she would have probably just broke it. She was too angry.
Yeah, destroyed it. Yeah.
And he says she's allowed to be angry. Like, she was allowed to be angry at that time. Like, her entire life was overturned. But she says he told her that she was basically a piece of shit for letting Feyre hunt on her own. And he's just like, I didn't say it exactly like that. But she's just like, no, you were right, though.
It was the first time they had met. Cassian sort of insinuated that it was not cool of her to let her youngest sister go hunting in the woods by herself. And it's true.
And Nesta's kind of, like, coming to terms with it herself. Like, she kind of knew it wasn't right, but, like, she didn't care at the time. She was so angry. So, like, her father's cot is there, too, and she thinks, like, how she thought he deserved to sleep there while they had the bed because she wanted him to feel a fraction of the grief, rage, and sorrow that she did. And she couldn't imagine that, like, he had actually brought the bed there so that they could have some comfort because she was too mad at him to give him that credit. But, like, now she's kind of, like, looking back on it like, oh, he probably brought the bed so that we would be comfortable. And then, obviously, he named a ship after her in ACOWAR, and she doesn't understand why he would do that. But Cassian just says, like, love is complicated. And she kind of thinks, like, she's never considered any of this from her father's perspective. Like, she's just been so single-mindedly angry that she never actually thought about how he felt in all of these moments. She thinks back to, like, how they lost the money. Like, he was so sure that this deal was going to be super lucrative. And, like, he sent, I think we get it in ACOTAR, but, like, he sent his ships away, and they took, like, a faster passage and ended up all being lost. So when that didn't work, he was embarrassed, and she actually tells Cassian about the debtors coming now, and of her being so afraid that she took Elaine into, like, the bedroom and hid from them. And Feyre was the only one that, like, stayed there and tried to stop them from, like, killing her father. And she says that she failed Feyre plenty of times. Like, it wasn't just letting her go out in the woods. It was also then, and, like, she knows she's failed her. And he asks if she's told Feyre that. And Nesta just says, like, she doesn't know how to say that, which I think is fair.
Yeah.
He says she'll figure it out, and she's done here, but, like, there's still time before Asriel will be back. So she takes the rose, and then they just go fly around and terrorize the humans of the town, basically. We don't actually get it, but...
yeah. With their presence. They're just like, the humans will be afraid of you being there, and he's like, let's cause a stir.
It's just kind of funny. So a month passes, and it's winter, and they keep training, and Nesta needs new leathers because, like, obviously she's packing on muscle. And she, like, looks in the mirror, and she doesn't look gaunt or exhausted anymore, even though Cassian is keeping her up every night with sex. But she doesn't look exhausted, so that's good. She feels bad that he never stays, but she also wonders when he'll, like, be done with her, basically. Because she's expecting that at some point, he's just going to be like, I don't want you anymore. And she's already sad about it. She thinks, like, she's never going to tire of him. So, like, it's kind of the opposite. And, like, she kind of starts thinking about it all. And I'm sorry, but she literally thinks that, like, she comes at the first splash of him on her. So, like, I just, like, what? Like, she doesn't even need anything else. It's like,
no, his semen on her skin just is enough to put her into the throes of an orgasm, apparently.
Yeah. Fun times. Yeah.
I just don't like him splashing on her. Like,
his seed splashing on her.
Yeah. Gross.
So that's something. Yeah. So at this point, the winter solstice is only days away, and she is practicing dancing with Moore twice a week. And Moore is actually using the Veritas orb to, like, show her
the dances and the music.
Because, like, you can teach somebody a dance, but if you can see it too, it's easier to visualize it as a whole. Moore, she's at a training lesson now, and Moore asks what Nesta is going to wear, and Nesta's just like, I can't wear the shit that you wear. Like, no, I can't. Like, she still dresses pretty modestly, and, like, she doesn't want to wear something that revealing, and Moore just says she'll look around. And Nesta says, thank you, Morgan. And it's the first time that they've, like, actually had a normal conversation, and it's the first time that she's actually said Moore's name. And Moore's just like, you can call me Moore. And you're like, they've been training together for a month, twice a week, and they've really not had a civil conversation. So, interesting.
Yay!
They walk towards the library together because Moore actually has to go see Clothos. So Nesta asks Moore if it, like, bothers her that Nesta will be dancing with Eris, and Moore says no, because she knows he'll be crawling by the end. Like, love it.
Yay!
So they get to the library, and Clothos hugs Moore, and she has books for her. And Nesta goes over to see Gwyn and Emery, because Emery's there because she wanted to see where they worked, which is...
Well, I guess the library's not open to everybody.
I guess it's fair.
Right? You need a special dispensation to go in there. You need the priestesses to sign off on you going in there, so... And, like, I guess, like, wouldn't you be, not annoyed, but sort of, like, imagine if, like, your two besties got to go to work together and do everything together, and you're sort of, like, on the outside looking in a little bit.
That's fair.
So sort of like FOMO.
Yeah, so she's there to see their work, and they're still kind of near where Moore and Clothos are, and Emery kind of says she always forgets how beautiful Moore is. So from that one line, I'm like, ship. I will ship them.
Yeah. That's
they're together now.
Mates.
Right?
They're mates.
It's so ridiculous, but it's still, my brain's like, oh, beautiful, you think?
Yeah. But, like, I do think that SJM does these sort of subtle things to sort of point us in this direction. Like, and I think they're valid. Like, I don't think they're misdirects. Like, you know, this sort of thing. Like, why would that need to be in there? Unless it was sort of foreshadowing for something in the future. Same thing with how, like, you know, Gwyn is always glancing at Asriel. I know there are a lot of Asriel Elaine shippers, and I, like, again, I feel like I've said in the past that I sort of don't really care one way or the other who Elaine ends up with. Like, I'm not on one firmly in one camp, but, like, just the fact that, like, and we learn next week, we get Gwyn's story, and Asriel features heavily in it. So, I feel like, why would you put that in there, that she's always glancing in his direction, and, like, why would you add those moments without there being something to it later on? You're not just going to say she keeps looking at him, enough for us to notice it in the book that she keeps looking at him, and then not have it mean something further on.
And, like, it could be a misdirect or, like, another option or anything like that, but it is intentional. Like, it's intentional that Sarah J. Maas wanted us to put this shit together. And, like, this situation specifically, I think Emery even, like, blushes, and you're like, oh, she, like, actually has, like, feelings kind of thing. Like, it's not just admiring a beautiful woman. It's, like, actually there's emotions that she's also feeling. So Gwyn has to go get to work, so Emery is going to go around the stacks with Nesta for a bit, so they go get her cart, and Emery says she swears. Don't know why that word was so hard. She swears she can hear her father yelling down here. So they go a level up, and because Nesta's like, yeah, the darkness in this library is a bit weird, so that's probably what this is. So Gwyn finds them again because she says she has a solstice gift for them, and it's actually chapter 21 of Meryl's manuscript, and it's about the rebirth of the Valkyries, and it's about them, the three of them, basically. It's their story of how they're, like, training to be Valkyries, and they're trying to basically start Valkyries again.
Which, I will say, Meryl has been a bitch this entire book. I thought that was pretty darn cool.
I found it interesting. I didn't really know how to feel about it, because I'm kind of like, you can't just declare that you're a Valkyrie just because you want to be. Like, it just, I don't know. Like, I get that they're training and they're using some of their techniques, but I just was like, can you just do that? But, like, clearly it's going to come up in more books that they're actually going to, like, I guess, develop I think they're going to develop an actual Valkyrie training plan and, like, an army type thing, like, actually have units and stuff. So I do think that it's going to eventually get there. But I just was like, this seems a bit early to be, like, putting them in the history books. But I think it's just a sign that it is going to be a thing going forward. Yeah.
Something. Yeah.
But yeah, Gwyn actually says, like, she wrote it and Meryl just, like, re-edited it, basically. But she tells them that, like, their stories are worth telling, which is, like, it's a theme kind of in this book of, like, them not feeling worthy. So I guess that night Cassian had left a note saying that he's staying at an Illyrian camp, and with the blood rite only months away, like, tensions are super high, and she can't really settle, so the house ends up giving her hot chocolate and shortbread, and I love it. I love the house so much.
I love it so much.
Me too. And then she actually tells the house that she wants to try a small fire. And she watches, like, she looks at her father's rose that she took from the cottage, and she just sits with it. And she mind stills, and she talks herself through it. And she basically sits there with the fire until it goes down. And she thinks to herself, like, she didn't fail. Like, this is 100% exposure therapy. Like, sitting with it until your anxiety goes down. So it's like a good step. She's working on getting better at it. So then she notices that, like, there's evergreen twigs, like, leading out of her room, and she's like, the house must have left this for me. But she follows the twigs. Oh, also, sorry, this is kind of related, but not. When she was walking with Moore to the library, it seems like there's, like, just a door that goes to the library from where they are. Yeah, so, like, there's a door that goes down the 10,000 steps. There's a door to the library. There's a door to, like, the study. Like, it seems like, I don't get it, but...
Doors everywhere.
So anyway, she just walks to the library, and there's not many people around because it is nighttime. So she ends up going down to the 7th level, and there's a light in the darkness beckoning her. So she just walks into the darkness. At the end of, like, I kind of feel like she's twirling around into the heart of the library, but she finds a small lantern at the end, and Nesta kind of realizes, like, the darkness is the house's darkness. And she kind of sees that, like, the house is similar to all of them. The house is also healing. So she thinks, like, she ends up blowing out the lantern and says she isn't afraid of the house's darkness because the house is her friend and her home. And I kind of love that, like, the house has this, like, darkness inside of itself, and, like, Nesta's just, like, so at home with it. And she actually thinks, like, this was a gift from, like, a solstice gift from the house to give her this, like, similarities, and, like, it's meaningful.
Yeah.
We go over to Cassian's point of view now, and he's thinking, like, he's usually super excited for the solstice because all they do is drink, and then they have snowball fights, and then they have sauna time, and then there's more drinking. But this year, he's at the Hewn City, and he's not at all excited because of the dances. Yes. He thinks, like, he's slept with Nesta every night, but she's never asked him to stay. And I'm like, you guys just need to have this conversation. Like, I can't be in each of your heads both being mad that you're not sleeping in the same bed.
Yeah. Like, it literally takes one of you just to say the word, stay. Like, it's one word. It's 4 letters.
But, like, he doesn't want to be pushed away again, and she doesn't want to show vulnerability, and you're like, ah! Yeah. Anyway. Farah and Rhys show up, and Farah's wearing a dress just like the original ones from, like, ACOTAR and the one that she wore in ACOMAF. The, like, 2 panels and very showy-offy. But it also shows off her swelling belly. And so this is her pregnancy announcement to the Hewn City.
It's like, surprise, bitches!
Basically. Nesta and Elaine kind of, like, follow behind them, and Elaine is, like, in all black, and she just looks ridiculous because it, like, leaches all of the color from her, and she doesn't even look as pretty as normal because black is so not her style. But Cassian thinks, like, Nesta actually threatens to bring him to his knees because she looks so beautiful. She has, like, a spiky black tiara on, and her black dress has small silver straps, and, like, the neckline plunges to her navel where there's a sapphire that actually matches, like, her tiara sapphire. So it sounds really awesome. I'd like to see it.
Yeah. I'd like to see some 100%, fan art.
Yeah. So Cassian can't really look away, and he knows that, like, her scent and his scent have had to be glamored to, like, trick Eris. And I'm like, where the fuck is this going? Like, what is the point of this? So Kier and Eris go up to congratulate Farah on the pregnancy, and Eris says that his father will be thrilled. And I'm like, is this a threat? Like, what?
Yeah.
No,
I don't get it.
But okay. Cassian kind of thinks, like, Rhys and Farah crossed a line asking Nesta to do this, and I'm like, she agreed. I just don't understand the point of this. That's my issue with this. Like,
yeah. I don't know why they feel the need to sway him so,
especially
hard.
Since, like,
Like it's one court.
But I'm also like, what is the end game here? Like, she's not going to marry Eris. Like, we know that. Everyone knows that. If you have to mask her scent because she smells like Cassian, like, what is the end game here? What do you actually think she's going to do? I don't understand. But anyway, Feyre basically starts the night and people go to celebrate and eat, drink, dance, whatever. And Rhys basically gives Eris a solstice gift. And Cass is like, why are we giving him a gift? I fucking hate him. And I'm like, it's just kind of funny. But it's actually the made dagger. So the one that Nesta made. And Cassian's just like, what the fuck? And Eris can feel the flame in it and asks like why they're giving this to them. And Feyre says like he's facing enemies outside of the regular rules of magic, so he should have a weapon outside of it too, because he's their ally. And
I feel like they're
100%.
trying too hard. Like this is them trying too hard, giving him a crazy magic dagger, like
100%
trying too hard.
And like I kind of get like I guess they could make another one, like Nesta can just make another one. It's not a big deal. But, like, still, it's like, what is happening? They didn't even give one to Cassian. Like, you'd figure they'd give one to their own people first. But I guess Eris is kind of like, this is clearly made. What the fuck? And Rhys just says it's from, like, his family heirlooms. And Eris is like, why didn't you take it out during the war then? Like, what the fuck? But they kind of just shut him down, and they're like, don't question us. It's so dumb. But they're like they're not telling him that Nesta actually made it, which I think is probably smart. Yeah. Probably so he just thanks them for it. And then Feyre says that in any other night or whatever, she would dance with him. But in her condition, she can't be spinning. So her oldest sister will take her place. And he's just kind of looking at Nesta, and he's like, I think I'd like the prettier one, please. But he doesn't actually say that. But Cassian is, like, watching Nesta, and she's just, like, staring at the dance floor, and he kind of wonders, like, if music means more to her than, like, he realized, and if it means more to her than, like, her magic and all of that. Because, like, it's really captivating her in a way that he's never seen. So, of course... Nesta and Eris dance, and Eris obviously knows how to dance because he's a like
noble born,
he's whatever he is, and he can keep up, and he's like holding her tightly, and she's actually like she smiles at him, and Cassian's like, what the fuck? But Cassian actually thinks like Elaine undersold how good she is. We go over to Nesta's point of view, and the music is speaking to her, and she is loving it. And she thinks, like, Moore did her makeup and gave her red lips and put eyeliner on her, and she says she looks like a queen. And she can tell that, like, Eris is kind of testing her with spins to see if she can keep up with him, and, like, she's killing it. Yeah. She's just really enjoying it. And that's kind of the only point of that, like... that point of view of hers, because we go back to Cassian's point of view now, and he thinks to himself, he knows the last part of the dance is like 12 spins that no one dares try, but of course Nesta does. So she does the spins, and everyone watches her, and like I guess Eris is like holding her hand as she spins, but it's all really on her. And the last 3 spins, he like lets her go to do them on her own.
Let's go.
And Cassian sees her smile in delight and thinks she deserves a king or an emperor with the skill that she has. And I'm like, okay. Sure.
Like, I mean, I appreciate that, like, it takes a ton of skill to do all of that, but, like, it's dancing.
I know. I'm like, this seems a weird connection. Like, Elaine deserves a king because she's beautiful, and Nesta deserves one because she has skill at dancing. So, okay.
Yeah. It's like, so are we saying that, like, prima ballerinas in the New York City Ballet deserve
I guess so. I guess that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
You know.
I guess.
Cassian can see, like, that Eris is looking at her with want, and he spins her away and then, like, drops to a knee, and I was like, holy shit, is he proposing?
Is he gonna propose?
I guess that's the end of the dance. Like, that's how that dance ends. I don't know.
Okay.
So they start the next dance. We go back to Nesta's point of view, and they're able to talk during this dance a bit, but Eris just says, like, Rhys has been keeping her hidden, but she's like, I saw you last week.
Yeah. And she called him out for being an a-hole.
But he says, like, he had never seen her like this, and you're like, fuck off. And that she's changed. And he whispers to her not to believe the lies that they tell about him. And he nods to Moore and says that she knows the truth, but is afraid of it. And this is kind of the point where everyone's like, what the fuck is going on? Can we get Eris's point, like, part, history?
What are they talking about?
Like, I need to know more. She basically, like, 100% plays him like a fiddle and, like, makes him completely in love with her. Like, we knew she would. And I'm like, to what end? But he tells her that she's wasted at the night court. And, like, they're dancing still, and then Cassian's just, like, done. He just cuts in and says move. You're like, that's not how you ask someone to dance.
It is not, no.
But Eris says he doesn't take orders from brutes, and Nesta's, like, seething at that, but she can't really show that because there's this whole ploy that they're doing. But she just says, like, are you trying to ask me to dance with you? And she can kind of tell from his eyes that, like, that he believes that she's, like, falling for Eris or something. Like, she believes that it's not all fake. He believes that it's not all fake, and I'm like, what the fuck? But
yeah, she
tells Eris not to be selfish, so she does dance with Cassian, and she can kind of tell that he's nervous to dance with her, but he actually is able to follow her pretty well, and, like, she actually smiles at him for real because, like, she's enjoying dancing with him because she loves him, even though she's never going to say that.
Yes.
Nope. Cassian's point of view, he actually hands her off to Az to dance with, and Moore comes over to chat with him, and Moore says that their lessons paid off. So he was, he was secretly taking dance lessons with Moore so that he could keep up with Nesta, and it's cute.
It is cute.
And he asks her then, like, how she's doing with Eris there, and like, obviously she's just like, you know, well, Eris there, and also her entire family, and just this court in general, it's, like, not great for her.
No.
But she says she enjoyed watching, like, Nesta play Eris, basically. And she says, obviously, Cassian didn't, though. But he says Rhys can deal with all that. And they look over at Rhys, and Rhys is actually talking to Eris. And Rhys, like, lets them both into his mind so they can see this conversation happening. So Eris is basically saying Rhys showed him what he can have, but what does he want in return? He'll basically give them whatever they want for Nesta. And I'm like, I don't understand the point of this. But Cassian immediately just wants to kill Eris because, obviously. And Rhys actually says it isn't his choice. And he says it's, like, foolish of Eris to say that he would give them anything. But Eris says he has his reasons. And Cassian kind of thinks, like, there has to be something more to this. Like, there has to be something that he doesn't know about Eris's past. So we're getting even more of a hint that there's something we don't know.
Yeah.
But Eris also says, like, he'd be happy to repay Cassian for ruining his betrothal by taking Nesta from him. So you're like, nah, he's still being a bit shitty.
Yes.
But he says, like, if they gave him Nesta, if he were to marry Nesta, like, obviously his armies would then fight for the Night Court because, like, he wouldn't let his sister-in-law's court basically be unguarded or whatever. But Feyre and Cassian are both pissed, and they're like, what the fuck is happening? But Rhys just says he'll consider it, and he'll talk to Nesta, because he is adamant that it's always her choice, even though, you know. Anyway, so we go to Nesta's point of view now, and she is at the, like, inner circle solstice party, kind of like the one that was in Frost and Starlight, and she and Cassian actually haven't slept with each other since the Hewn City party because she needed the distance from him because she's feeling too many feelings about him. She's also, like, she thinks about all this Eris shit and how he wants to marry her, and he's like, I'm just leaving that to Rhys and Feyre to deal with, and she's just been throwing herself into training still, so, like, she doesn't want to deal with that. Elaine actually comes up to her and sneaks up on her, and Nesta's like, I wonder if she learned that from the Wraith friend she has. And I'm like, is Elaine a little spy? Kind of like spying around, like getting into shit she shouldn't be? I'm like, interesting.
I would love it.
But Elaine is kind of snarky, and she's like, oh, did Feyre pay you to come like last year? And you're like, damn. And then Elaine says not to upset Feyre since it's her birthday and in her state. And you're like, she's fucking pregnant. She's not, like, dying. Well, she is dying, too. Well,
she is.
But not yet.
She's not, she's not going to die until she gives birth.
So Nesta actually cuts her off and just screams, fuck you. And I'm like, good. Like,
yes.
Good.
Great.
You guys need this. And Elaine actually just starts laughing. And Nesta's like, she immediately says sorry because she feels bad immediately after saying it. Kind of like sisters do. But Elaine's just like, no, I think it's a good sign that you're actually not coddling me anymore, basically. She doesn't say that, but, like, that's what we get. And she, like, just, like, leads her to the party. As they walk in, Asriel is kind of just, like, looking at them, and Nesta can see that there's something between him and Elaine. And you're like, what does that mean? So, obviously, everybody's there. Amryn is sitting in Varian's lap, and Cass, Lucian, and Rhys are, like, arguing over something to do with sports. And I'm like, do they even have sports in this world? Like, I didn't realize there's Sunball. Yeah.
Ethan used to play.
Did you know? Nesta actually thinks to herself, like, she asked Gwen and Emery to come, but Emery has to visit her family, and Gwen isn't really ready to leave the library yet to actually come to an event like this. But she's like, she would have rathered have her friends here because, you know. Yeah.
Of course. It's
exactly.
Awkward as fuck.
Cassian actually, like, gives her his seat and then goes to make her tea, and she sits down, and, like, it's a bit awkward, but she just wishes Feyre a happy birthday, and she starts making conversation with Lucian, because he's next to her. And she asks how the spring court is, and he's just like, it's awful, obviously. And then she asks about Jurian and Vasa, and he says they're at each other's throats where they like to be. And you're just like, are they getting together? Are they having some good old hate sex right now? What's happening there? He asks her about her training then, and she says, like, it's going great, and they kind of talk about it a bit, and Moore actually asks if she can come to learn some Valkyrie tactics when she's done with Valahan. And, like, it's kind of a nice moment of, like, Moore actually trying with Nesta. Yeah. Like, I'm assuming maybe in the next book, maybe we'll get some of that, of more training with Nesta and the priestesses and stuff. So, you know. She also says, Moore says, then she can see Cass wear his present. And Nesta is just kind of sad because she just thinks, like, she didn't get anything for Cassian. Like, she didn't get anything.
But she has no money.
She also can't leave. But she didn't get anything for anybody, and she feels a bit bad. She actually gets up to talk to Asriel because he's in the doorway, and she can tell that this is painful for him to be near Elaine. And I'm like, what? Since when? And why does she know that? Like, what? Why is it, like...
I feel like I didn't interpret it that way. I just thought, like, he was being aloof. Like, it's hard for him to be in with everybody.
Yeah, I don't really know. I was just like,
I thought she thought it was painful for him to be near Moore because everyone thinks he's in love with her.
yeah, but I think the way that, like, he keeps looking over at Elaine, like, I think, I don't know. I was just like, is this really what we're doing? When did this become such a big deal, and why did I know nothing about it? But yeah. We actually go over to Cassian's point of view now, and he has Nesta's gift in his pocket like last year. And he thinks about last year, and he thinks he spent months tracking down like a really tiny, expensive book that was one of the first books printed, and it was basically like a collector's book. It wasn't for reading. It's like a tiny book that was for small fae to read, but is now a collector's edition type thing. And he fucking threw it in the Sidra. Mm-hmm. A, what the fuck? That's a collector's edition book. Exactly.
How dare you?
B, I thought that it was going to be something more important.
Yeah, I see.
Like, especially after the big fuss that everyone made about it. Like, I just,
yeah,
it was a bit of a letdown. But I was also like, you ruined a collector's book, like one of the first books ever printed. Are you fucking kidding me? He does think that he did regret throwing it in the Sidra immediately, and he kind of thinks like he hopes this year is different. So like he does have a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear around Nesta's feelings. So, you know. Mm-hmm. But he opens his gifts now. So he actually got a warfare manuscript from Reese, some beef jerky from Az, an ugly green sweater from Moore, a travel set of spices from Amryn for when he's in like the Illyrian camps, a magic travel mug for tea from Elaine. And I'm like, when did Elaine become Cassian's best friend? Like,
I guess they do spend, like, if she lives in the river house, before this whole him training Nesta and like essentially moving up to the House of Wind, I guess we would say he probably had a room at the river house, probably spent a lot of time there.
I guess. He also got a painting from Feyre, and like I just think that Sarah J. Maas is really trying to make us know that Feyre's a really good artist in this book, because I think she's seen the memes. But it like it's a painting, he opens it in private, but it's a painting of him, Azriel and Reese on Ramiel after the blood rite, and he knows that like she clearly saw it from Reese's memories because it's like done perfectly and actually what it looked like, and it like brings tears to his eyes that it's so meaningful kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we also get that like Lucian brought a gift for Feyre and Elaine just opened it and it was like pearl earrings or something, and she like barely even thanked him for them. And I'm like, she's kind of being a bit of a bitch.
A bitch.
And I'm like, just tell him no. Like, why are we dragging this out? Like, it's the same thing that people are saying about Moore and Azriel. Like, just cut him, like, tell him no. And like, I believe in my heart of hearts that Moore has already told Azriel no, and he's just likes to pine after things he can't have. With the amount of time. But like, I don't think that Elaine has actually had this conversation with Lucian to be like, hey, I'm not interested, but I think she needs to. Yeah.
Go away.
Elaine and Feyre got Nesta some book vouchers for her favorite store, and like, it's basically enough credit to get like 300 books, but Cassian thinks like she needs more like 500 for a year. And I'm like, that's a lot of fucking books. And Azriel actually gave Nesta a Fey light that you can like attach to your book for reading in the dark, so it's just like a book lamp. It's super cute. Really like really good gift from him. And then you're like, and he gave Cassian beef jerky. But he did say he could.
Maybe Cassian really likes
he said he
jerky.
couldn't think of anything else that he'd like more. And you're like, it's probably not a bad gift. It's just kind of funny. But she actually, like, Nesta actually gets up and gives Azriel a hug and, like, smiles at him because, like, it's so meaningful for her. And I just think it's nice.
Yeah. Well, and that somebody else, like, got her a present that wasn't her sister's.
So, like, clearly they're developing a relationship, like, and a friendship, really.
A friendship, yeah.
Cassian wants to give her his gift, but he doesn't want her to break his heart again like last year. So, like, he doesn't want to do it in front of everybody kind of thing. And you're like, so sad.
Yeah. It's fair, though.
I get it. We go to Nesta's point of view now, and she's just exhausted. It's like 1 a.m, and everyone else is drunk. And, like, I know when you stop drinking, other people aren't just going to stop drinking because you're not drinking anymore. But, like, we didn't really even have the conversation of Nesta, like, actually actively deciding that she doesn't want to drink. It was kind of made for her. So, like, it's kind of like...
Yes.
I found this a bit odd. I'm like, I guess Nesta has decided that she doesn't want to drink anymore at this point, but, like, we haven't really got that confirmation from her head. And, like, would they have let her drink if she wanted to drink, like, tonight? Or were they like, no, we're all drinking, but you're not allowed? Like, I just don't know if this was a choice that she has made herself, or if they're forcing it on her. And it's just kind of like, I found it interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not even really the point.
Yeah. But I think at this point, like, you're right, she is choosing not to drink. But I think initially, obviously, the choice was made for her. And just, I think she has since realized that it doesn't help her. It doesn't make her feel good. But, like, but you would think that they would have thought a little bit more carefully about inviting her to this event and having such free-flowing, like, literally everybody else getting intoxicated around her. And then, like, you'd think they would have been a little bit maybe more sensitive to that.
But I also I kind of wish that we had, from her point of view, her making the choice that, like, she kind of says, like, she didn't really want to drink, but I don't know if, she kind of says that in this moment, but I don't know if she would have even have been allowed. Like, I kind of wanted them to be like, oh, it's solstice, did you want a glass of wine? And her be like, no, I'm fine. And then in her head kind of be like, it doesn't make me feel any better. Like, I'm choosing not to drink now. Like, I just wanted, I wanted something like that. But that is just because I have my own relationship with alcohol that I'm like, I just expected something. I don't know. It's not even really the point of anything, but it was something that I just noticed.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So, she goes to her room, and Cassian follows her, and he comments, like, she didn't even say goodnight, and she's just like, yeah, I was just tired, and, like, you guys were drinking and having fun, so I didn't want to bother you. And he basically just says, oh, you've been tired a few nights now, because I guess, like, they haven't been having sex. And he asks what's going on, but she just says, oh, it's nothing. And he gives her present now, and she actually apologizes for last year. And he says he forgave her a while ago for that. Like, he didn't really need her apology for it, but it is nice of her to actually, like, own up to... Yeah.
Give it, yeah.
So she opens the present, and it's like an egg-shaped music thing that you press a button on, and it, like, starts playing music. So he explains that it's a symphonia, and they're super rare, and they're from Helian's court, and it actually traps music in it, so it recorded music. So he actually went to the Hewn City the next day, and he had the orchestra play the waltzes that she loved. And then he also went to some of her favorite taverns to get the musicians from there to play, and, like, recorded it on this egg thing. And she's just overwhelmed by the amount of, like, effort he put into this gift and how perfect it is for her. And she's just like, I can't accept this. Which I don't think is the right thing to say. But I get...
No, but yeah, like, she literally got him nothing, and he literally went, like, all over the place and got all these people to contribute to a gift for her in this super rare thing. Like, it is meaningful, right? So, I sort of get feeling bad about it. That's just like somebody being like, it's Christmas, here's a car, and you being like, I didn't get you anything.
Chocolates. Like, yeah,
right? Like,
I get where she's coming from, but, like, it kind of
I don't think she handled it.
No,
right.
but, like, obviously she's also just overwhelmed by, like, how meaningful it is. And, like, it's also one of those things you're like, you can't just bring that back. Like, what's it gonna do?
No.
So...
I'd like to return this, please.
So yeah, she's just like, it's too much. I can't accept this. And he says, it's a gift, not a wedding ring. And then she just says, no, she'll look to Eris for that. And I'm like, we're fucking this conversation up so bad right now. And he's just like, you're considering that? And she just doesn't say anything because she wants him to think the worst. And you're just like, why? But she's clearly, like, she's pushing him away on purpose.
Yeah. And he sees that.
And he says, it's better to marry a viper like Eris than be with him. And she says she's not with him. She's just fucking him. And he says, that's the only thing a bastard-born brute like him is good for. And you're like, he's so insecure about who he is. And she's so, like, hates herself so much. And they're both just being idiots. But he basically admits to her, like, he was jealous at the ball and that she should marry someone like Eris, not like him. Like, he knows that she deserves more than him and she doesn't deserve a low-born bastard. She deserves a prince, a king, or whatever. And she's just like, Eris is a brute and a piece of shit. Like, what are you talking about? And she says she would marry him because she's just like him and she deserves him. And Cassian is, like, good and brave, brilliant and kind, and she could kill anyone who made him feel less, and she'll never be good enough for him. And, like, all of his friends know that too. Like, she's awful is what she's basically saying. And she actually starts crying, and she says, like, this is her punishment after failing in so many ways. Like, she wants him, but she's terrified to lose him. And, like, she looks up at him, and he's just crying, too. And, like, he pulls her to him and kisses her and says, like, he says she won't marry Eris, and she's just like, yes. And he says there's going to be no one else for either of them, and she agrees to that, too. And you're like, oh, my God, it's happening. This is the moment. This is everything.
Yeah.
And so they kiss, and she thinks to herself, like, the kiss says all of the words that she can't. And I'm like, I love you. Is that what this kiss is saying? I love you? Because that's... And also, you're my mate.
You're my mate. Like...
So he, like, gently takes off her clothes and lays her on the bed. And they have, like, straight, meaningful making love sex. Like, not actually, like, the hardcore shit that they normally have.
Yeah.
But it's, like, making love. If that was ever... And I think she even says in her head, like, that he's making love to her. And you're like, okay, we get it. But she yields her heart to him, and she says she lets her walls down. And I'm assuming this actually happens, but, like, she sees pure golden light flows into him and is met with his own, and they weave together. So I'm like, this is the mating bond. Yeah.
Must be.
So I'm guessing, like, she's finally accepting it is what's kind of happening. She's finally like, okay. And it actually makes her start to cry again. And she's like, she doesn't even know why she's crying because, like, she's happy.
I just feel like crying during sex is really not, like, the way to go.
I agree. But he says, say it. And she automatically knows what he means. And she just says, you're mine and I'm yours. And the golden light is a harp and it's music between their souls. And I'm like, cool. So then he bites her nipple, and of course she comes with him at the exact same time, and it's the best and most meaningful, like, orgasm they've both ever had, and he actually comes more than he's ever come in his entire life, of course, for some reason. Great. And she just thinks to herself, forever, forever, forever. Like, so you're like, oh, this is it. This is happening. So, they kiss, and he immediately is basically hard again, and he moves in her again, and you're like, oh, they're having sex again. And when they're finally, like, done, Nesta says, stay with me. Which you're like, I'm glad she fucking did. But also, can you imagine after this, like, mating thing where they're like, we're in love? They don't say that, obviously. But if she was just like, get the fuck out of here. It would be hilarious. But he holds her while she sleeps, and it's like special. Good times. Cute. And that's where we end. And it's not going to go poorly after this.
No, considering that's only week 4, so we still have like 115 to 18 to 20 pages left.
And like it's just a meme about how the last 100 pages of Sarah J. Maas books are like insane. It's like slow build, and then the last 100 pages are like so, you know.
We'll see what happens. So I guess we're going to wrap it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions for us, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or you can check us out on Instagram or Facebook at Coffee and Co-Read and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week we're going to be finishing A Court of Silver Flames, and that will be chapters 59 to 80, so make sure to follow along, and if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.